Question before the House is does a booming China spell trouble for America? The answer, in my view, is a resounding yes. In the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why. But first, what I call the China threat, which is something that Beijing likes to refer to as the China threat theory, is in fact real. It is a danger and it is growing. As the late CIA analyst and White House National Security Council official Konstantin Menges put it in his book, China, the Gathering Threat, he said the reason that China poses a threat is because despite its economic reforms, it is today ruled by a nuclear-armed communist dictatorship. This is the source of the trouble. I've identified what I call 11 sources of trouble for the United States from China, and I'm going to list them for you and then talk briefly with the time remaining in some detail on them. The first is China's military buildup. Number 2 is the danger of war over Taiwan. Number 3 is expansionism over energy resources. Number 4 is the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and missiles. Number 5 is massive intelligence operations to steal U.S. secrets and technology. Number 6 is influence operations and so-called money diplomacy. Number 7 is unfair trade practices, including currency valuation manipulation. Number 8, intellectual property theft. Number 9, human rights abuses. Number 10, religious repression. And number 11, environmental degradation and global warming. To start with, the most serious trouble for America from China is China's military buildup. On January 11th of this year, China conducted an unprecedented anti-satellite missile test. They fired a missile that traveled through space and hit a low Earth orbit satellite, a Chinese weather satellite, destroying it and creating 16,000 pieces of debris, which pose a threat to other satellites. U.S. officials were shocked by this development because U.S. intelligence estimates of China's military have been stating for years that China is 10, 15, maybe 20 years behind the United States, that it is so far behind that there is no way China's military could pose a threat. What the Chinese ASAT test showed was that China is not seeking to follow the U.S. missile for missile, ship for ship, submarine for submarine. They're going after niche weapons. They're trying to leap ahead with special technology. And they're doing this in a number of key areas, one of which is anti-satellite weapons. Officials in Washington estimate that within the next 6 years, China will have the capability of destroying all U.S. low Earth orbit satellites. Basically, this could be the modern-day equivalent of a space Pearl Harbor against the United States if there were a conflict over Taiwan. Regarding Taiwan, the danger of war over the Taiwan Strait continues. China has not renounced its plan to use force to retake the island. It is applying pressure across the board to pressure this democracy. It is succeeding in many ways to influencing U.S. policy in ways that would diminish support for this traditional ally. The danger of China expanding to gain resources is kind of a new source of trouble that has been identified by some studies in the Pentagon, one of which was called the so-called string of pearls strategy. It shows that China is developing a string of pearls, bases, alliances along a path going from the Middle East, where much of its oil comes from, all the way to China. There are very much concerns that because energy is so integral to China's modernization effort, that China at some point will have to expand militarily, perhaps the Russian Far East, perhaps Southeast Asia, to take over places that have valuable oil and gas resources. Intelligence operations. This is a subject that I focused on in my recent book. It also highlights the case of Chi Mak, who was a Chinese intelligence agent recently convicted in California of being an unregistered agent of the Chinese government. It's part of a mushrooming spy case, more of which will be coming out in the coming weeks and months, which shows that China has been very successful in stealing some of the most advanced U.S. weapons technology, including the next generation quiet electric drive for our warships, secrets about our submarine force, and as well as the Aegis battle management system, which is the heart of the modern Navy. As for influence operations, this is another area where China has been extremely successful in influencing policies against the United States. We see this through so-called, what one Chinese defector called money diplomacy, buying up former U.S. officials and using those officials to lobby against policies that China doesn't like. This is having a deleterious effect on the U.S. economy and U.S. policy because it's preventing the United States from truly understanding the directions and goals of China's military modernization and its general modernization as well. Representative Randy Forbes, the chairman of the China caucus in the House of Representatives, estimates that China spends upwards of $100 million annually on these influence operations. Unfair trade practices and currency issues, as well as intellectual property theft. These issues are fairly well known, but I would like to highlight one issue surrounding the whole trade question. The main policy for the United States towards China has been to trade with China as a way to seek a liberalized Chinese government and political system. Unfortunately, the idea of trading with China as a liberalizing factor is not working. In fact, just the opposite is happening. Many feel that China's buildup, its military buildup, is being benefited by its economic growth, but yet we have seen little or no political reform in China. This is a very serious source of trouble for the United States. On human rights abuses, I would also point out how, at its core, China has never fully resolved the Tiananmen massacre in 1989, when pro-democracy protesters occupied the square. As well, religious repression is also in this field, as well as environmental degradation. As many as 7 out of 10 Chinese major rivers are now dead. This debate has often been couched as is between engagement and containment, but really the issue here is that what China needs is democracy, and that is really the solution to mitigating these sources of trouble for the United States.
Bill Gertz, many thanks indeed. A model of timeliness.